Hello and welcome to another edition of Beyond the Blueprint podcast. I'm your host, Jeff O'Donnell, and joining with me today is Jonathan Wolk, founder of Wolk 360. Thanks for being with us today, Jonathan. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Excellent. So let's kick things off. Could you tell us a bit about your role at Wolk 360 and how you got started in the construction business?
Yeah, so it's a bit of a long story. Wolf 360 provides architecture, construction, and real estate services, and I'm a licensed architect, contractor, and real estate broker in North Carolina. And it started when I was young, moving to North Carolina from New York. My dad had big family, small house, lots of furniture. My dad was doing plans of where the furniture would go, and I was intrigued by these floor plans that he was doing on graph paper. And then he was in charge when we moved to North Carolina. He was in charge of a museum addition renovation project and got to see the plans and the models. And I was intrigued by the big plans and obviously the models, and had always played with Lego and Lincoln Log and Tinker Toys and girders and panels and things like that. And so, it really intrigued me and got more and more into design and understanding what that is. But I always liked the construction side of it. And so when I went to architecture school, I went to an architecture school that UNC Charlotte that actually was focusing on where architects build. And so through my career, always on the architecture side, but always keenly interested in the construction component of that. And so fast forward again, years later, I was building my sister's cabin in Alaska that I had designed. And so really went up and built it. And over the course of 2 seasons, so that really introduced me to actually building something that I had designed, and the complications of it and the things you didn't think about on paper, and also realizing that it's a lot easier to make those adjustments on paper than it is in the field, which is something I tell my clients all the time. It's a lot easier to move some lines on paper if you want a wall moved over 6, 12, 18 inches than it is
hmm
once that wall's up and in the field, and it's a lot less costly as well. Um, and so, yeah, so as I worked throughout my career as an architect, I then sold my practice to my partners, went and worked for some large general contractors. Coming out of that, got my general contracting license, and then realized that a big component of it also is the real estate and being there when you're in the acquisition. So whether it's land, whether it's a house that you're going to do an addition renovation to, whether it's a building that you're going to convert, or whatever the case may be. So being there at the real estate junction is also critically important, both for just sort of, can you do what you intend to do? Do you have issues with setbacks or use and zoning or impervious area, things of that nature? Can you do it? And what are the hurdles in which to do it, so that you can make some of those decisions beforehand and prevent you from acquiring something for a certain purpose and then finding out after the acquisition that you can't do what you want to do. And so that's really where the idea of Woke 360 came from, and being able to uh, provide services throughout the process of the project. So from identifying property, you know, can it do what it do the architecture, the analysis, some due diligence, project costing, and then basically the full execution of it.
All right. No, that's a great story. So you definitely wear more than one hat being in the architecture, construction, and real estate. Do you have a favorite hat that you wear?
No, for me, it's really all very integrated. I've been asked, well, when you go to a site, are you the architect? Are you the contractor? Are you the real estate broker? And honestly, really, it's all three. And I like the balance of all three. I like, going and touring properties and seeing what can be done with it. And then I,
hmm
the design part and coming up with concepts and the sketching and stuff like that. Still an old school sketcher. We talk about, our hands have ink on them. Our hands are dirty and our boots are muddy, right? So we do both. But and I like it throughout the course of the day. I can work on several different aspects. Maybe do some design, look for some property, put together a budget or project schedule or coordinating with subcontractors. And so that aspect of it, I like being able to sort of, and some days you want it focusing or being fully entrenched in one. And some days, you kind of, do a few different things. So I like that aspect of it. But I really feel that that's really project delivery is really, looking at it holistically. So whether people are doing it in teams or sort of under one roof, I feel like that's really the perspective that it really takes to have a successful project is you really need to be looking at all this. And what I like about it being integrated is when we're there on day one walking a property and you're talking about what's important to you, what you like about this property, you love the sunset, you love the view, whatever the case may be, then we can incorporate that to the design. And then when we're in construction in the field, we can also remember those and incorporate those issues and make decisions based on those priorities and not forget about them or not make a cost, a change for cost issues that winds up wiping out one of your key priorities because the construction team's not aware, the design team, the real estate team went through and why the owner, originally bought this property.
Well, that's very impressive. So now looking at the broader industry, what are some of the biggest shifts or trends you're currently observing in the construction market?
I think in construction, in particular, cost, is always an issue and concern. And we continue to, battle those costs of, availability, material costs, labor costs, what you want and what you can afford, what's the, if it's an investment project, what's the ROI? How do you make those numbers work? What are the alternatives in terms of materials or pricing? And that seems to be just the that's kind of always been there, will always be there, but is so volatile now. And also you do get a lot of new materials and innovations coming to market. And are they cost saving? Is there a cost benefit analysis that needs to be done to say, hey, this is going to save you on operating costs, but it's going to cost you more upfront. It's going to save you on insurance costs, but it's going to save you more, cost you more upfront. Those kinds of things that really weigh into, what one of the things I really love about design and construction is the things that we're doing are buildings for 50, 60, 100 years, right? So there's
Yeah,
what's your intent? Is it an ROI and you're going to sell this thing in 5 years or you're going to get it leased up and sold? Or is this a forever home?
right.
What are those goals as well, which really come into the decision making and those costs and maybe operating costs are a bigger thing. We've done lots of hotels and apartments. Operating costs are a big factor, whereas maybe on some other type of project, the operating cost is not as big an issue.
Right. Now, do you find there's more significant operating costs for the end user or yourself or both?
It's really, I mean, if it's a project that we're doing, again, depending on sort of the parameters. So, a condominium project versus a apartment project, we may look at the operating costs as a more significant issue on both for us as well as if we're going to sell it and who we're going to sell it to, that the operating costs, continue to maintain the necessary ROI. But however,
Right.
if we're doing a condominium project, we are aware that, and maybe a selling point is that we've got some sustainable features that do help on, the operating costs and keep the operating costs down for the buyer or, you know, an operator or something like that. So maybe we install, some water saving devices that cut down on water bills so that even if it's a condo, maybe together they pay as part of the HOA, less costs on utilities. And we know water costs are going up like 4% a year. Well,
Right.
if we can reduce that by 20-30%, then you've got a 20-30% reduction with a 4% cost increase. You get some annual savings on your operating and therefore your ROI. So it really comes down to, a lot of analysis and solar and even just passive solar and things of that nature. So we're always, evaluating those things, but it really comes down to, what are the goals and aspirations of the project, whether it's something we're doing for ourselves, with a team, for a client.
Right. Yeah, so it sounds like managing those financial variables can be a real headache sometimes. But beyond that, what's currently working really well for Woke?
Uh, Honestly, the architect led design build, one of the things that works really well for us is so many people come to the table, thinking, one, they kind of think this is the way it goes. People are used to sort of design build where they don't, a contractor hires a designer, the client never even never even gets to meet the designer. The contractor basically controls that dynamic, and they don't
Right.
necessarily get what they want. And then people are like, oh, with you guys, we're actually meeting with the designers and working through that design to get what we want. And then having
Right.
that balance of working through design, budget, construction, materiality, working through what it is that you want. That works really well for us. And when people get to it, they're like, oh, this is the way it should be. And that's kind of going all the way back to, you know, when I was younger, that's kind of what I've always felt is like, why would, it's to me, it's the old, Mac and PC conversation. PC software and hardware, two completely different places. Mac, they develop the hardware and software in an integrated fashion. And to me, that's really the way architect led design build happens, is that you're basically doing the software and hardware in an integrated fashion.
Right. Yeah, no, that sounds like a huge advantage. So what areas are you finding most frustrating though?
It still comes, cost, availability, material availability, we're in a lucky market. We're still high supply, high demand, low supply. And so, crews that we've been working with for 10 years, they're busy, and they're getting fewer and far between, both through attrition in the market. I had a tile guy I worked with for years, and it finally was time for him to retire. His kids didn't want to go in the business, and we had to go find new people. And so that's a struggle, and finding people that get it and understand it, and availability. People are busy. And so being able to make the timelines work, and then the usual battles of in construction. I tell clients there's three things that we can't control. We can't control the weather, which around here right now has been very frustrating. And then we can't control the inspectors. So they come out and say even though you've got the plans approved and you've got this and that, they see something different. They kind of have carte blanche and they want to see it this way or that way. Plumber's been doing it a certain way for 20 years, and this inspector says, no, it's got to be done that way. So that gets frustrating. And then the last thing we can't control is our client. We do our best to manage them, but ultimately, if they say they want to move that wall, now that they see it in the field and they want to move it, understanding the ramifications and cost implications of moving that wall, you know, is far, even though we've worked through it, over and over and over, we've gone through it, we've gone through several reviews, we walked the project when it was just, chalk lines, and then, once it's up, it is different, but it's also important because it's, we want you to have what you want. But, those are the things that get, the things that are out of your control, are what, are frustrating. Things show up damaged, things get delayed in shipping, you know,
Right.
the normal frustrations of construction and managing the day to day.
Right. So I've been hearing some rumblings. There's a shortage of trades right now. Are you feeling that as well?
Yeah, for sure. And one of the good things for us is most of our subcontractor partners and vendors we've been working with for years, but even
Okay.
their bench isn't as deep as it used to be. We've seen a demolition company that we work with regularly. They've lost about half their workforce, that just aren't around anymore, and have left, and good legal crews, and they're not showing up or disappearing or leaving. And also quality, a lot of we lost a lot of good skilled craftsmen through attrition. Like I was talking about my tile guy, it was time for him to
Yeah.
retire. He didn't really have anybody to hand it off to. There's been a lot of, you'll hear things like if you're trying to do, especially around here, you're doing a stucco project, you can't find these stucco guys anymore. They're all gone until you're trying to get, drywallers or, guys that mud drywall and stuff to do this stuff. And it's just not the same. And if you're looking for
Right.
a nice textured finish, you're really, we last nice finished stucco job that we did. We actually brought a crew up from Florida to do it because it's more common down there. But,
Okay.
it was a premium to bring them up. But yeah,
Yeah.
availability of trades is definitely a struggle. And like I said, even the companies we've been working with for years that are our go-to guys, their bench is a lot shallower than it was previously.
Right. Yeah, that's a shame.
Yeah, one other thing that's really happening too in our industry, both on the architecture and construction side, is and real estate really, but is a lot of the people, kids, I'll call them, going through school, their dad or family may be in the construction business. Maybe they're mechanical contractors or plumbers or whatever, and they don't want to come out and be the plumber. They want to be the project manager, general construction. They want to be the project manager or the technical guy or the field engineer or something like that. They don't want to be the guys swinging the hammers. And
Right.
so even though we've got maybe a better educated workforce, they're not coming out and being the actual labor. They want to come out and do the management. They want to do the software. They want to fly the drones. They want to do the scheduling, spreadsheets and the updates and the technical stuff, not
Right.
the hard, gritty stuff. And so we're also losing a lot of skills through that, and a lot of handoff of those skills and those trades through kind of old school mentorship programs are also kind of, disappearing. And so, yeah, it's going to be, it's going to be interesting to see if, AI and robots kind of help take over some of that and start to fill some of that void
Right. Yep.
over the next, several years. But, at this point, it's still a bit of a struggle.
Yeah. Yeah, that's too bad. So if you had a magic wand, this is kind of a fun question. If you had a magic wand and could fix just one thing in your business that's holding you back or slowing you down, what would that one thing be?
Cost surety. If you know if you could quote something and know that that quote was 1,000% correct, that would be the best thing. So this is the benefit that we have with working with our trades over and over, is we've all gotten to an understanding of what's included, what our expectations are.
Right.
There's still things that slip through the cracks. So, we were talking about a commercial project we're doing, a countertop, design. It's an ADA, bathroom, and going through that top, the 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 supplier does the top. They don't do the brackets. They don't, they're like, nope, we come in and we install the top with the undermount sink, and then everybody else, connects to that. And so we've got a gap of, okay, who's going to put in those brackets, right? So
Hmm.
really, getting that scope and that surety of cost so that that they've got everything included,
Yep.
and, making sure that you've got that covered at the front end as opposed to learning it at the back end. That's the struggle in these things. And, every category has those issues. With plumbers, it's constantly, what fixtures are they providing? Are they providing fixtures, not providing fixtures? Are they, providing some, but not all, all those little, moving parts. And like I said, you've got to go through that in every single category. And, if there is a way to just, all of us, wave a magic wand, and all of us basically be on the same page. Because when I talk to you about installing a toilet, and to me, it might mean, yeah, that means you're providing the toilet, but the plumber's like, no, I'm installing your toilet that you buy for me to put in, figuring stuff out like that, if if
Right.
the way to wave the magic wand and us all be talking, even though we're all talking the same language, be talking the same thing would be great.
Yeah. No, absolutely. That'd be good. So how are you guys managing that best you can?
Really, we go through, we've got a very thorough scope, documents that, so by, again, by having it integrated from the architecture and the construction, it's not just the plans, right? The plans are one part of it and a very important part of it, but really going through detailed scopes with each trade to making sure what they've got, covered and included, and essentially, checklist after checklist, quite frankly, really is how you assure that you've got all that covered. And then ultimately in our process, we care, every project has a contingency, and that contingency from kind of early, concept to the end of the project, you're always carrying contingency for these reasons, for these unforeseen conditions and things that pop up, and that keeps everything under control, because we know there's always going to be something missed. Every project is unique, no matter how many times you do it. There's always a unique situation from site to site,
Right.
location to locations. So it's really about carrying that contingency. In the best case scenario, you don't touch it and you've got, you know, extra money at the end of the job, or money for, the client to spend elsewhere or to use something.
Right.
Typically you use some of it, but not all of it. And but at least it's there, and that helps manage the process and keeps things, things are anxiety producing enough, right? When you're going through this and you've got a change or an unforeseen condition pops up. But by
Yeah.
having that contingency, you take out the anxiety of the cost, right? Oh my God, we've got this, $10,000 change order. We don't have $10,000. Well, by having that contingency of $100,000, we know we've got that 10 grand. So we don't have to worry about coming up with the money, because we know we've got it sitting.
Right.
And so that's really the best way to manage through that, and as detailed a scope as you can get, and reviews. And like I said, for us, it's using the same crews over and over. They understand us, they understand our expectations, we understand their process, and it works really well together. So you essentially have a team that has worked together and worked together. And so, to me, I always say it's a difference between a Super Bowl team and
Hmm.
an all-star team, right? The all-star team is a
Yep.
bunch of great players, but they haven't really played together before. Well, we're
Yep.
not only a bunch of great players, but we played together before. So that's what to me makes a big difference.
Wow. No, that's amazing. That contingency is really smart for sure. So now looking ahead, where do you envision Woke 360 being in the next 6 to 12 months?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've got a great backlog. We've got some really cool, exciting stuff coming up. And, I think we're just gonna keep, moving forward with, what we've got, and working through working through sort of the issues as we've discussed. Some of those things are out of our control, weather being the most obvious one, and you just got to kind of roll with it. But yeah, I think, again, in our area, we've still got, low supply, high demand. There's plenty of people relocating. It's a great, triangle, Raleigh, North Carolina is a great area to be, and people want to be here. And, I think our model, one of the things that came up was, people were having to compete on housing, and they put in an offer on a house, they don't get it because they got outbid, or somebody gave them better terms, or could close quicker, or whatever. And so what part of the 360 is, hey, if you've got $1 million budget, and let's find a house that's four or $500,000. Do a four or $500,000 renovation to it, and at the end of the day, because you like the area, now at the end of the day, you've got, your $1 million custom home, instead of trying to just go out and buy something, that you like, or that's almost quite right. Let's get this thing to what you want it to be. And so, I think we're going to continue to see that to be a popular option in this market.
Yeah. So lastly, are there any big goals you guys have for growth or anything, operational efficiency or anything like that?
Yeah, I obviously every project we try to do better than the last. operationally, we run a very lean, tight group. Like I said, we work with the same crews over and over, and that really helps build up the team and the bench for the projections for everybody. And so we work regularly with our groups and say, okay, what do the next 6, 12 months look like? What is your availability to take on more work? Are you wanting more work? And I think just keeping those lines of communications open with the groups is, we've looked at all the different, softwares and apps and all these things. And one of the difficulties for us to integrate is we might integrate some kind of app, but then the team does something else. The plumber uses something, the mechanical contractor uses, everybody uses something else. And so I find just sort of old school talking, check-ins, emailing out updates, team meetings, on-site meetings, project plan reviews, that really works well for us. And maybe we're a little old school in that, but it still works really well. And
Mhm.
I think the clients really appreciate it because, we pick up the phone and call. We keep you updated on what's happening.
Right.
And I think that direct communication is with all the technology for as great as it is, has lost something. And I think, for us, it's part of our business model. It's like I'm the architect, I'm the contractor, I'm the real estate agent. You don't have to go out and shop for these guys and make sure that they all work well together, that they all play in the sandbox. Nice.
Right.
When we interview a client interviews us, we're really interviewing each other. Do we have good rapport? We're going to get into a lot of personal information, right? We're going to get into your finances. We're going to get into your lifestyle.
Yeah.
Do you want the kids on the other side of the house? Do the in-laws visit regularly and you want them on the other side of the house? So we've got the primary bedroom on one side and the guests and kids bedroom on the other side.
Right.
What is your lifestyle like? And really making sure that design illustrates and fits your lifestyle, because also we're getting into your finance. Can you afford the lifestyle that, yeah, you might want $1 million house, but you can only comes down to it, you can only afford a $750,000. What, how is that through square footage? Is that through material selections? And so I think with it being, I think a lot of people want to look at it as a transactional, especially when you get into straightforward real estate. Oh, we like this house. We're going to buy this house. This house serves us. When you're designing something, it's a lot more, personal and a lot more really getting into how you live, how you want to live, what can you afford? Is there
Right.
that you've got to, we can plan for later, and this is what we can do today. This is what we can, plan for later, so we don't paint ourselves into a corner. So I think for us, really maintaining that personal touch is key, is a differentiator. And what I say to a lot of people is, we're going to be working a lot together. If you like me and I like you, we're going to have a great time. If at the first meeting there's some questions, then we maybe need to talk to some other people to see if there's a better fit, because we're
Right.
getting personal.
Yeah. No, for sure. So, I guess, is there anything else you'd like to discuss before we finish up?
No, I mean, I think Wolk 360, I think, is a unique option with the real estate, the architecture, and the construction. There are
Absolutely.
more of us coming out there, which I think is great. I think, it's been something in the works for years, but I think it's now gaining more in popularity. And I think if there's people like us in your area, or if you're in the Triangle area and would love to talk, we'd love to talk to you. We're at wolk360.com and on all the socials as well. And but I think it's a really good option and or alternative to sort of what I'd call like traditional led, design build, where the contractor really just controls the design, and also a good alternative to, traditional design bid build, where the designers and the building team don't even know each other. So I think seek it out. I think it's a good option for a lot of folks, and I think that's really, I think it's one of the trends you're gonna start seeing more of over the next few years.
Excellent. No, that's amazing. Okay, well, that's all we have for today's episode of Beyond the Blueprint. I want to thank our guest, Jonathan Wolk, for his insight and expertise. It's been a real pleasure. Yeah, perfect. I'm your host, Jeff O'Donnell, and we hope to catch you on the next one.
Thank you.